this Big 12 mess it seemed like this could go any direction. In the end, it looks pretty simple, Sam, that BYU Texas Tech is the rematch.
Yeah, I think so. I wouldn't suspect an upset in either of those games. UCF traveling to BYU, and the one that I would probably feel a little uncomfortable about is Texas Tech at West Virginia, just because it's a long road trip. Texas Tech's just coming off a bye week. I thought Rich Rod's team has played a lot better in recent weeks, and you've seen them kind of, they upset Houston a few weeks ago. They beat Colorado. So that one makes me feel a tad uneasy, but every team not named Arizona State, with it, which they missed their quarterback. Baron Morton was out that game. Every other game, Texas Tech has beaten their Big 12 opponents by 20 plus. So if they take care of business, I suspect we'll have a Texas Tech BYU rematch, and then it'll be interesting to see how that goes and what type of. At that point, I feel like Texas Tech will have punched its playoff ticket if they win this weekend. But it'll be interesting to see what happens with BYU if they end up losing the Tech game in the title game.
I'm curious, Sam, because you look at the SEC title game could very well just be Georgia and A&M, a one-loss team and an undefeated team, and the Big Ten title game could be two undefeated teams, and those don't affect the playoff as far as participation. Now, seeding is another thing, and those four could just get shuffled around based on the results of those games, and what every other thing is. But in the Big 12, they're not given that same courtesy, even though these two teams kind of stack up when it comes to what they've accomplished with their records. I know that their non-conference records weren't as strong as maybe some of the others. Yeah, no doubt. It is funny to me how a second loss in the Big 12 is almost unforgivable, whereas if you're in the Big 10 or the SEC, you can kind of weather that storm. And so, some of it has to do with scheduling. Let's not act like BYU's non-conference schedule was great. It wasn't. Portland State, Stanford, and East Carolina. That's not a murderer's row by any stretch. But to some degree, you have to, I think, give them some credit for what they've accomplished. And they've beaten every other team that you've asked them to beat. The only team they haven't beaten was a top 10 team. And if we're saying, we're going to give Notre Dame credit because they lost to two really good teams, well, why is BYU not going to get the same credit for losing to one top 10 team? So it's very subjective and it's very annoying. So I don't, if you're BYU, bottom line, I think you're rooting for the teams that are already in the bracket to handle business. And you want the teams that are on the bubble, the teams that you're battling with, your Miamis of the world, your Utah, all those Vandy, you want those teams to lose so you can increase your chances of getting in the bracket.
Yeah, you want A&M to win. You want Tennessee to win. You don't want upsets. I saw some people saying, well, if they can't get in this year, then the Big 12 is just never going to get two in. And I mostly agree with that, except for, well, you could lose your first game in the championship game, and that would be the way. But there is that it's razor thin margin for error compared to other leagues. So I get where they're coming from there, and it is frustrating. But go beat Tech in Arlington, and that'll get you there. So Sam, I mentioned A&M. Texas, my goodness. Texas looks like they're in a nice groove right now. A&M's been really good all year. Just what's your anticipation level for this one, knowing the stakes and knowing the matchups?
Yeah, I think the stakes obviously are much higher for Texas because I think A&M at this point is in the bracket. So at this point, I think A&M is playing for a first-round bye in one of the top four seeds. Because if you fall here, then maybe you slide into one of those next four seeds and you're hosting a first-round game, which is not a bad position to be in, but getting that extra week of rest certainly doesn't hurt. So the stakes here are for Texas. You win and you're in, or I shouldn't say you win and you're in.
That's watch it now.
Let me not say that. But let's be honest. If they win and they beat Texas A&M, there's going to be a lot of discourse about whether Texas deserves to be in, because there's going to be a lot of talk about their resume, which is they beat Vandy, they beat Oklahoma, and they will have beaten Texas A&M, which is a really good resume. However, it does discount how they've looked for a lot of the season. I would say for 2/3 of the season, they did not look like a very good football team. They look like a disjointed football team with a really good defense and a really mediocre offense. And now, on the flip side, I see a team that is starting to get itself together offensively, and they're starting to throw the ball around really well. And defensively, they're starting to to sputter just a little bit. You know what I mean? And I know Arkansas is a really explosive offense. Taylor Green is really a really good quarterback. I expect him to be a really good quarterback at the next level as well. But the last few weeks, the end of that Georgia game, and you saw what they did against Arkansas, Texas has not been as dominant defensively as they were early in the year. And that's where I'm most fascinated with this game on Friday night, is because Texas A&M is one of the most explosive teams in the country. They've got a great quarterback in Marcel Reed. They got two really dynamic, I would say really three dynamic receivers in Mario Craver, Casey Concepcion, Ashton Bethel Roman. A really, really impressive trio of guys. They've got a really good veteran experience offensive line. So more than anything, I know a lot of attention will be on Arch and how he handles the defensive pressure and the blitz packages that A&M throws. But I am more curious to see how Texas defensively handles this A&M passing game.
A&M statistically on defense, when you look at yards, et cetera, not very good, or not, average at best. But it's not a stats board. It's a scoreboard. You just wonder if they mess with that a little bit too much, it's going to come back to get them one day.
Yeah, the one reason why I'm not hugely concerned in this game about that for A&M is that Texas has yet to show to me that they can run the ball at an elite level consistently. I don't even want to say an elite level. They haven't run the ball at a really good level consistently all year. And that is so unusual for a Steve Sarkisian offense that he is, before this season, I think every year that he's been a play caller, he's had 1,000-yard rusher. That's not going to happen this year, obviously. But the Texas has to just have enough of a run presence to make you respect the play action pass, which is a major part of the offense, to respect the RPO game. And if they do that, then maybe it makes things interesting. But if they can't run the ball on Friday night, then that's Cassius Howell and that defensive line. They get to tee off on Arch. And we've seen that Texas offensive line at times struggle with edge pressure against elite rushers in the SEC off the edge. So that's the thing to me. If you're Sark, if you're Texas, you've got to run the ball with some degree of consistency, some degree of success early in the game so that you don't allow A&M's edge rushers to pin their ears back and go after Arch consistently.
Sam, I don't think it's obvious that they're not going to get 1,000-yard rusher. All Trey Wisner needs in the next two games is 558 yards. I mean, but look, by the standard he came out in high school, doable. But clearly in the SEC and then in whatever postseason they're in is not. Is the ACC going to make Jim Phillips just move into the desert and live in a cave? Because they're an absolute mess with Pitt jumping all over Georgia Tech. SMU knocked Louisville out of it, so I guess that's kind of a good thing. But it's still
back-to-back playoff ponies potentially.
Yeah. How about that?
Yeah, that's and then Miami. They can win games and still be screwed. Like it's not good in the ACC.
And you know what the sad thing is actually are five, I think, really good teams in that top of that conference. They're not necessarily top 10 teams, but Virginia's been a great story. Obviously, we saw what Pitt did to Georgia Tech the other day. SMU has quietly been really good. And man, you start to look back at that game early in the year against Baylor. If that one goes a different way, where are they in the playoff conversation right now? Obviously, they have to win out to get in. And then Miami, I'm at a loss for words with the Miami discourse, because what we have done with Miami and Notre Dame and pretended like that game didn't exist and didn't happen when it comes to ranking the playoff teams. But I think if you're Jim Phillips, you're rooting for Miami to continue to win at this point, because I think that's you're going to get a champion in all likelihood, but you would like it to be your best team, which I still think at the end of the day, as much as I don't trust Mario Cristobal in a big spot, that is the best team in this conference. And I think if Miami gets in the bracket, I would expect them to win a football game in the playoff, because I still think on both lines of scrimmage, offensive line and defensive line, I think they have the best combo of the two in the country. And so it's a good conference. It's just, man, they've took some losses and they've had some stumbles at the wrong time. And I think for whatever reason, like I said, I'm going to get on a soapbox here. I don't understand why people thought Miami losing at SMU was unforgivable. Like, that became such a big talking point when they lost that game. Well, that's an unforgivable loss, or that's a terrible loss. Why was it? It was on the road against a really good football team. I guess it's because people don't pay attention to SMU nationally and don't realize that, hey, Kevin Jennings is still there. Right, last year, this was a playoff team last year that still has a lot of talent on the roster. It still is a good team. And I don't know why that loss was looked at as so unforgivable as opposed to like Alabama, who lost to Florida State, who's turned out to be terrible. And it seems like we've forgotten that one existed as well.
Yeah, I'm with you. And it's like they're waiting for, well, let's just see if Miami can win out, and then we'll make our decision on how much the head-to-head matters, right? And I get like the things that have happened since then, but you're right. The SMU game's looked at as like some horrible loss when it shouldn't be, because they might win the ACC and make the playoff themselves. But, yeah, it feels like they're waiting to be forced to make head-to-head matter is basically what's happening with that conversation. All right, so Saturday, let's say probably like 3 o'clock, the Egg Bowl has been decided. Let's assume Ole Miss wins because they are about touchdown favorites, but it's in Starkville, and we've seen teams like Arizona State earlier this year. Many teams have had trouble there.
Texas, yeah,
barely escapes. What's Lane Kiffin doing after that game? Where's he telling people that he's going?
Man, I've gone back and forth on this so many times. Part of me thinks he's leaving because if he's not leaving, why would Keith Carter release a statement last Friday saying that a decision is coming? Why would you release a statement to say a decision is coming later? Because if you were going to stay, wouldn't you not have just re-upped right now? Wouldn't you have just re-upped on the bye week and just put this to bed so that your team could go play its rivalry game and go into the playoff distraction-free and focused on possibly winning the national championship, which is in the cards for this Ole Miss team? If that's not what you're going to do, then if that's what you were going to do, then you should have done it last week, in my opinion. Now, maybe Lane is probably still very torn. He could be. I don't know. I don't know this guy personally. I don't know him super well other than what we see and everybody else reads on his social media and all that. But to me, I think if we're going this far, that means he's really honestly torn about it. And the more I think about it, the more I think he's going to leave. And I seem to favor LSU in this race. Even though I know some people have said, hey, this is a Jimmy Sexton play. Jimmy has done this with other clients before, and a program gets a lot of the hype and the buzz and ends up going. But if you're going to leave Ole Miss, where you already have them in position to win at a high level right now, for anywhere else, you're going to leave for a program that can win national championships. And the program of the three that he's choosing from, Ole Miss, Florida, and LSU has the best pedigree in the last 25 years of those three programs of winning national championships. I know Florida has won a couple. This was in the Urban Meyer era, but they have not been very consistent since then. In LSU, they've had 4 coaches in this century, and 3 of them have won a national championship. And I think if you're Lane Kiffin, if that's what your aspiration is, and that's truly what he values, is trying to win at the highest level, and he feels like he's reached the ceiling at Ole Miss, which honestly I would agree. I think he's probably at his ceiling to this job. I think if they're going to throw the kitchen sink at you financially in terms of roster support and salary, my gut by 51-49 says he goes to LSU.
Yeah, all of what they have, as much as things have changed for an Ole Miss or others like them, to be a part of it now, because of the way football, the rules, recruiting, transfer portal, and more. You and I traded some text messages. Your thoughts when you got the email in your inbox on Friday, like at 11:30 a.m., from Dr. Linda Livingstone that Dave Aranda was being retained.
I was not terribly shocked at the decision. I was really shocked at timing. I thought they would let the last 2 games play out before making that decision. Was really surprised to see the decision made as early as it was. And Smokey, I know you guys have all got the finger on the pulse of this. And once Mac Rhodes was out, the chances of Aranda staying went way up.
No doubt.
And so I think we all knew that. But I still thought there was a little bit of a chance that if Baylor ends up losing the last 2 and finishes 5-7, that maybe they'll, even despite the transition at AD, maybe Linda Livingstone would make a change anyway. So I was really surprised to see that happened, and not surprised at all to see the fan reaction to it. Obviously, a lot of disappointment from that fan base. And then to see them go out and play the way they did against Arizona, that's got to be a gut punch to that fan base. So, certainly for the coaching staff and for the players that believe in him, I'm sure it's a positive, but man, they have got to get something together. And my question is for Baylor, if you're keeping him, where do you go from here? What are you doing different next year to make yourself a contender? Because guess what? We've already changed staffs. We've already changed coordinators multiple times. We've already invested more into the roster. What else are you doing? What else are we doing to make this program better? That's my question for Baylor leadership is, if this is really the guy and this is really who you believe in, then what are we doing to make sure that he is successful? Because everything else that has been tried, and they've tried everything and under the sun for the last 5 years to make it work, and it hasn't. And so that's what I'm curious. I'm curious to see what the signing class, if they're able to hold on the signing class here in this last 2 weeks, and what the offseason looks like in the transfer portal in January, and what that roster looks like, because as we know, they're losing a lot of guys that are really important to that team. And I just wonder if, even with the decision, if we're going to be sitting here in late September and saying, hey, they started 1-3 and they're going to make a change then, when maybe they could have done it now.
Well, I asked Aranda today, we'll have the audio in the next segment, about what can change. How can you explain to your stake or shareholders or whoever that things can get better and can change? We'll have that in the next segment. Paul?
Well, Sam, I mean, just here's what I think. Without an athletic director, so say you've got assistant coaches in the staff who get offered other jobs, which I don't know if they will or not, but or they go seeking other jobs because they read the writing on the wall and they, start saying, all right, well, I'm going to go be the wide receivers coach, at LSU because I know this guy who got hired and I'm going to take that job, whatever it is. And they move on. Well, then the guys that you get to replace those guys who may leave probably are not the ones who are the most demand, because they know the writing on the wall of there's no athletic director. And when that guy comes in, he's likely going to be given the directive to, I mean, it's not directly, but you're the one who's going to fire the head football coach. So they're not going to stay. So I don't see anything that they can do in a year to make it better, which is when you do this to a coach, like, okay, you've given him a lifeline, but you haven't pulled him out of the water either.
Yeah. Yeah. And the thing is to draw, if you do have staff defections, to draw really good assistant coaches, you're going to have to give them 2 or 3 year deals guaranteed. Mm-hmm. And so you're pouring more money into that. Now, here, I will play devil's advocate here and say this is one reason why I could see the logic in this decision. And you've seen it at Florida State, and you've seen it at Wisconsin, and you've seen it at other places that have decided to retain their coaches. I do think there is an argument in this modern era to say, instead of dumping 15, 20, 25 million, whatever the buyout is, to fire the coach, and then it's going to take another 30 plus million to hire a new staff. Instead of taking that, why not take 15 of that and put it into the roster raises or new assistant coaches, whatever it is. And I know I'm kind of talking out of both sides of my mouth right now after I just said, hey, you've turned the staff over multiple times. But what I'm saying is, on a holistic 30,000 foot point of view, I do understand an administrator's inclination to say, why spend, $40 million to make a coaching change that's going to take to fire one and bring a whole other staff on? And why not spend a fraction of that to put it in the roster? And if you need to hire some other assistant coaches, hire those that are high priced. And maybe that makes it work and maybe gets together. I had this conversation with somebody about TCU when, TCU, fans were a little bit upset about Sonny Dykes. It's like, hey, should you make a change to Sonny Dykes? I'm like, well, are you giving him everything that you need to succeed? Like, and with Baylor specifically, I'll tell you this. I remember they did the shirts a couple of years ago. Keenan Hall had the shirt that said, we beat players. They have gotten better on that front, but you talk to agents and people in this industry, Baylor's not at the top of the market for players. So there is more room where Baylor can spend and be more competitive for players in the portal. And so that's where, if you're going to do this for Aranda, then you need on the back end to start spending more money on players. You need to get better players in. You need to upgrade that roster in a big way and give your guy a chance if you're going to do this. To me, that's the only way to do it. And that does, at the end of the day, cost less than buying a coach out and hiring a new one. So that's the one window of logic that I can see. And I think Wisconsin's trying to do that. I think Florida State's trying to do that. And I think you're going to see a lot of schools try to do that right now, especially when they're already scrambling to try to spend $20.5 million plus on athletic department salaries for the players that are playing.